Hey, what is up guys? So today we are going to be talking about Pot of Cupidity or Pot of Desires as we know it here in the TCG. Now it's unquestionably right now it is the best card in the Dark Illusions to actually pull without a doubt as far as the prices go in the game. So it's like the highest value out of this new set. But is the card all hype, or is it actually a card that is worth investing money into, or perhaps getting rid of them now because you know it's not going to be good in the future? So we're here to talk a little bit about this card. Now I'm sure a lot of you guys know the effect, but its effect is relatively simple. Let's go ahead and read it real quick. We'll talk about its rulings, and then we'll also talk about its pros and its cons. So we're going to argue both sides here. So anyways, Pot of Cupidity or Pot of Desires in the TCG, you banish 10 cards from the top of your deck face down. Draw 2 cards. You can only activate one of them per turn, so it's a relatively simple and straightforward effect. But anyways, let's go ahead and look at like some of the meta, because if you guys look at OCG, sometimes things can follow in the TCG because we just haven't got some of these cards yet, therefore we can't play some of the stuff. But if you look at what's winning, there's a lot of decks that are running triple Pot of Cupidity. Again, Cupidity and Desires, they're the same card. It's just sometimes I might say Cupidity and sometimes I might say Desires just because like the deck list in OCG, that's what they call it. But if you look at Blue Eyes, heck, Blue Eyes is running it. Like, unless you're banishing like triple copies of Blue Eyes, you'll be okay. Like, you can still manage to function in most decks. But there's just so many decks, ABC's playing it. Like, there's so many meta decks that are playing it, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But I want to go ahead and talk about like the rulings and also other other things in the game. But anyways, when we're going to be talking about that, I'm going to go ahead and just randomly spectate. Heck, we might see a lot of these Pot of Cupidities in action here. So first off, I want to go over some rulings. Now, currently this is how it's ruled. And if this changes, let me know guys in the comment section below, because we got that next big event is essentially World, and with Worlds you usually go by OCG rulings, and this is how it's currently ruled. You can look at the banished cards if you are the guy that banished those cards. So like if my opponent activates Pot of Cupidity, I cannot look at his banished cards because they are banished face down. Now he can actually look at his cards. Now the reason why they've incorporated this is so you cannot do illegal moves. If I was to activate emergency like E-Call, and let's say Stratos was my only target and Stratos is now banished, it would be an illegal move because it's not actually in my deck. I couldn't activate it. So for those reasons, that's how it is currently ruled. If that changes, you guys in the comment section let me know, because again, the next big event is Worlds, and that might be something that it might be relevant in the future later if they change things. I don't know if you guys were playing back in the day, but we had a Tour Guide Sangan ruling. There was Tour Guide Sangan, detached Sangan got effect, and then I was like, wait, you can't do that. And sometimes they change rulings on Yu-Gi-Oh, but as of right now, you can look at the banished cards. Now, you cannot do anything with the banished cards. Even though you can look at the cards face down, you can't interact with them. Like, for example, Cosmo Town, you cannot use Cosmo Town to just add any card. Otherwise, well, you activate that in Cosmos, it's like, oh, Cosmo Town, I get really, like, whatever I want. So you cannot really do anything with majority of cards, unless it just says, like, how many banished cards are there. If it requires, like, a specific banished card, it's technically, like, unknown, so to speak. So cards that would benefit by having a certain card banished, it's considered unknown in a sense. We'll have to wait and see if there's any cards that require certain things that is also face down. It's like, if you have this card that's banished and it's also face down that's banished, it might have some effect. I don't know, but as of right now, for the most part, most of the things can't be interacted with. Like, there's no cards that just say, like, even if it says add a banished, card that's, like, very specific, even though it's banished, it's face down, so you can't interact with it again. But, as far as the card being good, now, like I said, it's the most expensive card right now. Usually how it goes is if a card is good, it'll maintain its value, and obviously if it's not good, then it'll just drop off in price. Now, I don't want to focus too much off of probability in this video, because you can always say, if you play 3 copies of, let's say, Blue Eyes, and you're playing a Blue Eyes deck with triple Pot of Cupidity, as, I just showed you guys, it's meta, it's winning. But the thing is that if you banish, like, let's say all 3 Blue Eyes, yes, that can hurt your deck. But the more you play, the less likely you are to banish every single copy. Like, if I only play one, like, Maxi in my deck, and I activate Cupidity, and I banish that one, obviously, there's not going to be any more Maxis. The more Maxis I play, the less likely I am to banish all copies in my deck. I think that that's self-explanatory, but again, I don't want to focus too much off of, like, what percentage? Is it 17%? Because even if I tell you guys the percentages, it doesn't matter. If you banish all 3 copies of Blue Eyes, the percentage doesn't matter, because you just like lose some of those games, and that's just how card games are. Now, it is like really rare to open up with 3 copies of Pot of Cupidity, because some people will argue, well, if you open up 3 copies, you can only play 1. Well, yes, that is true, but the thing is again, Tengu was at, well, obviously you played 3 copies of Tengu, Reborn Tengu when it was out, and it sucked to draw all 3, but you know what happens. Even if the probability is really low, it does happen. Now, also, I do want to first say that it's not just draw 2 cards. It's actually, in a sense, it can be better or it could be worse. So, it's essentially draw the 11th and 12th card because you're going to banish 10, then you draw. Now, you can use this to your advantage whether you're top decking with Plague Spreader, you're setting up with Sylvan, so you don't want all of these cards, or something along the lines of that. There is, like, reasons why, this could be better or for the worse. But, for the most part, that's what I wanted to cover first off. And now I want to jump into, like, the pros and the cons of running this card. So, the pros of this card is it really helps you OTK, FTK, set up a stun board. I actually recently did a video showing off a deck that ran Cyberstein into stun deck that just really has great consistency, and it just runs a lot of cards just to draw super fast, and that allows you to pull off your FTKs, OTKs, your stuns. Some decks, you really don't get like a turn 2. Like, for example, Heroes, you really need to set up that Dark Law immediately. And I know we don't really play Heroes in the TCG as much, but in the OCG, you'll see quite often Heroes will be played, and it's a deck where you really need to set up turn 1. Like, if you don't have a Dark Law turn 1, the deck generally doesn't do as well, because that's how the deck needs to orient itself. So it's really good in those decks that really need to establish either control or FTK or OTK relatively fast. Or you can, thin the deck, you can, do some crazier combos that require more extensive cards. Although, technically, if you're banishing them, you could lose some pieces of your combo, so that could also kind of be a con. But generally, it goes relatively fast. But the thing that makes it so good is being able to get that extra 1 card. Going back to what I mentioned before, in certain decks that need a stun, with a Cyberstein, you're going to be very vulnerable if you don't have something to immediately negate something with, because especially if you're playing 5,000 life points, it's not going to be looking too good if you don't have anything to back that up with, other than the other, like, 1 monster that you bring out with the Cyberstein. So, like, again, there could be some downsides, but for the most part, like, what I'm trying to get at is you really want to be able to set up your board immediately. Now, also, what it's good for is a slow deck. For example, like Quacky Mirrors. Like, I know the deck's not like meta, but the thing is it helps some of those decks that really don't get those turn 10 plays. Like, most decks right now in the game, they lose relatively fast, especially to meta. So it definitely helps out those decks that never deck themselves out anyways. An excellent example would be like Burning Abyss. That's a deck that, you can deck out relatively fast, so Pot of Cupidity could actually make you deck out if you're playing that. And you might not need Pot of Cupidity. But a deck like Quacky Mirrors, you're never going to have that ability where you're going to, again, deck yourself out because you're running out of cards, for the most part. I know there might be some circumstance where it happens, but for the most part, it helps those slower decks have a chance. And it doesn't really make them, like, super, super fast to the point where they're, like, high tier, but it definitely does help them out. Also, with a deck like Sylvan, you can kind of stack the cards, you can do certain things. Again, in any FTK deck, there's really no reason why you wouldn't want to play the card, because, like, you're going to win in 1 turn. Why not play at least 1 copy of the card? But yeah, for the most part, it's overall really good. And again, decks that like to OTK, FTK, or establish a board that's necessary, like turn 1, otherwise you lose. Again, Heroes is an excellent example of that. If you don't throw up a Dark Claw turn 1, most of the time your deck just isn't playing very well. Now let's go ahead and talk about the cons of it, so like the bad sides of this card. So first of all, it is an expensive card, but like we're talking about game mechanics here, not price-wise, because it is, like I said, the best card out of the new set. But if you draw into another Pot of Cupidity, it's not going to advance your game state. You're essentially just, banishing 10 cards. It does thin the deck, but at the same time, you got to keep in mind that you're not really advancing your game state, again, if you draw into another Cupidity that turn. Sure, you can activate the other one next turn, but at that point, you might just lose the game, because this is a very fast game, especially when we're looking at what ABC can do when it throws up Infinity turn 1 and then it throws up an ABC. Like, it can be very nasty to run into, so like a lot of decks need that like turn 1 play, so it could technically not advance your game state if you play multiple and you activate one and you draw into the other. The next disadvantage is obvious. You can banish all the cards that you want to draw into, but there's no real way to factor that in unless you're stacking your deck. So that is something that is part of the cost. Like, if you're playing against a deck that is like, let's take Raid Raptors for example, and maybe you only have 1 card in your entire deck, like a random Kaiju that you main deck, or even if you side deck it, you have that 1 card to out that person's like play, but then you banish it so you lose that play. Now, technically this is a con, because yeah, that can happen, but the way I see it is majority of the time, you're not going to go through the entirety of your deck. I mean, yes, there are certain circumstances where you're playing, especially like in like Burning Abyss, Phantom Knights, like you can go through your deck relatively fast because you make the 69 Dantes every single turn. But for the most part, you don't deck out. Like, it's not that common that you're going to be decking out. So I feel like the cons of decking out are very, very minimal. But it's again very good in those FTK, OTK / stuns. But as far as the cons go, those are the main cons that I thought of. If you guys want to let me know of any of the pros and cons that you guys felt like I missed out on, let me know in the comment section below. But now let's go ahead and also talk about, you know, in the meta, what is actually running this, and, you know, looking at the OCG, because we just got this card in the TCG, we haven't had any large-scale tournaments here in the TCG. We have Worlds coming up relatively soon, so we'll have to wait and see. But as far as the meta goes, like, what's running it in the meta? Oh my gosh, this is a Karibo. Karibo bad reaction. What? Okay. Oh, this is something new here. But anyways, as far as the meta, like, what are the decks that are winning in the OCG that are running? The DDDs are running it, the Metalphosis are running it, Blue Eyes runs it, Speedroid's running it, ABC's even running it, Heroes, Yosenju. And these are all top decks that are winning tournaments right now. Yosenju, there was like one, but I figure, you know, it's at least something obscure, so sometimes, you know, people see that one, like, rogue deck there, and they're like, oh, okay, I want to try this out in my, you know, rogue deck, because, you know, sometimes cards are expensive, I totally understand. Although, you know, sometimes people just don't like meta, you know, I understand. So, like, hey, Yosenju's running it, it topped in OCG, they're running Cupidities, or the Pot of Desires. So as far as the meta that's not running it, there are ABC decks that don't play it. Burning Abyss, Phantom Knights, Necros are actually showing up in the OCG. Frogs also don't play it, and Monarchs don't play it. But again, looking into the future, Monarchs might be hit pretty hard. Now, I've shown off a lot of OTKs. If you guys want to go ahead and check out the video down below in the description box, I'll add a video showing off some of the OTKs that Pot of Cupidity can pull off. But as far as I look at it, guys, I think, like, if you guys want my opinion on it, because I gave you guys the pros and cons, and I'm trying to remain neutral throughout the entirety of this, but overall, like, here's my review of the card. I think it's a great card in majority of decks. Again, certain decks just can't play it. So, is it just a hype card? No, I think it's a great card. But, you know, looking at that ban list, it'll get a reprint, and then they'll hit it after they you know, give us that reprint of the card. But for the most part, I think it's a pretty good card, and it is definitely worth some money. Now, is it worth 50 bucks? That's up to you to decide for yourself, because you guys asked me, you know, should I pick some of these up? I think the card will definitely maintain some value. It won't be like a $1 card anytime soon. So I think it's still a great card. It just all depends on the deck that you're playing. But overall, if you guys look at the list, a ton of different decks are playing it, and it's a card that a lot of different decks can play. It's not just catered towards one specific deck. So I don't think it's bad if you have them to, you know, just kind of use them in a lot of different decks. Try it out yourself. Obviously, if you're playing online, try it in all your decks and see what works. I mean, there are going to be times where you banish the cards that you need. But think about this. How many times have you played a game where you've gone through all your cards? It's not very often. Now, yeah, you could argue if you're playing 3 copies of it and you're activating all 3, but at that point, you probably should have won the game already, because that's generally how Yu-Gi-Oh! Goes, especially with the power creep that we've been seeing. The game is just really fast. But you guys let me know how you think this card is. Do you guys think it's going to maintain its value or go down? Personally, for me, I think it's going to go down a little bit, but it's still a great card, and I don't think it's going to be like a $2 card anytime soon. But those are my thoughts on it. I think it's overall pretty good. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and make sure you guys give that like button a titty slap. And I'm signing out.